The dogfight is pure conflict, two men dueling on the open plain of the sky. In its terrifying purity of purpose, it is perhaps the essence of war.
A dogfight it's exciting. It was like a joust, really. Here's an aircraft that's piloted by a thinking person. If he's good, you better be better.
It's just like being in a knife fight in a dirt floor bar. If you want to fix a fellow, the best way to do it is get behind him and stick him in the back. Well, it's the same thing in an air fight. If you want to kill that guy, the best thing to do is get around behind him where he can't see you and shoot him.
World War II had a brutal way of weeding out the average, so the fighter pilot had to be good. It didn't hurt to be lucky either, but there was no compensating for a lack of courage. He had to want to be there.
I might say motivation has an awful lot to do with it. I think that's, you know, something you can't measure. It's inside you. Guys that would close on the enemy, you know, a killer instinct. I think you had to have that, too.
To be a good fighter pilot, he's got to quick on the draw, in the sense of knowing the situation, seeing it, and reacting.
To the people at home, they were as pure a hero as the war had to offer. The air war over Europe required the skills of the fighter aces, pilots who had 5 or more kills to their name. The fighter aces of the 357th Fighter Group were the sort America needed in such dangerous times. Men of skill and courage who chose to serve. Men who saw not just duty, but adventure. Thomas Hayes, Clarence Anderson, William O'Brien, Richard Peterson. World War II found them more boys than men, raw, untrained. But when they learned to fly, it was something for which they had been practicing in one way or another all their lives.
Our parents would take us, like if we were visiting some city, you know, like San Francisco or Oakland or something, they'd take us and dump us off at the airport on Sunday morning and then come pick us up at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And we would just spend the whole day looking at airplanes. And even then, I can remember I wanted to be a fighter pilot at that time, not even knowing what it was all about.
The war was an opportunity, a chance to learn how to fly, to hone and perfect their skills.
I canceled out of school. I went down to enlist in the Air Force. Gee, filled out all the blanks, happy to see you, and all kinds of enthusiasm from the recruiting office. After I signed all the pieces of paper and so on, he says, all right, now take this home to your parents for signature, because I wasn't old enough. I was not 21, I was 18. Boy, I had to talk like a senator for about 3 days to talk them in to signing. Neither one would sign the paper, because as far as they were concerned, it was a death warrant for them to sign a paper for me to enlist in the Air Force.
Friendships grew quickly in the common ground of training. On the train to California, Peterson met a young man named Jim Jago, a military academy graduate and already something of an old military hand.
So Jago and I were the ones who were usually the renegades, and if I ended up with the merits, then Jago would also walk with me, whether he had them or not, so we would be keeping each other company.
They trained on the P-39.
An interesting thing is the guy that checked me out in the first P-39 was standing there with a bandage all over his head, boy, and he still has some blue marks around through here. And his classical instructions were, watch out for that son of a gun, OB, because it'll kill you.
Not all who entered flying school would be pilots. There were tests, checks, counter-checks, all designed to ensure that only the best became fighter pilots. A third of the recruits were weeded out before basic fighter training even began. Anderson, O'Brien, and Peterson all made the grade. So did Jim Jago.
When it came time to graduate, which was March 10th, 1943, boy, that was a thrill, because we now had our shiny gold bars and our silver wings, and we were just in hog heaven. That was just great. Because, you see, nobody could touch us. We knew all there was to know about this game because now we had our wings.
Underneath the pleasure and the pride, however, were dark hints of danger they had yet to face.
Jim Jago. He was at Oakland and doing aerobatics and the usual things that we always had done together. And in pulling back to pull it out of the dive, it mushed into the hills and he was killed. And that was quite a shock. It was because he was a real close friend. And so it began to kind of bring home more closely again the frailties of flying these kind of aircraft, that they were high-powered aircraft, and they could jump up and bite you.
The members of the 357th would first meet in Tonopah, Nevada, an Army Air Force training field for fighter pilots. Anderson and O'Brien came in as flight leaders, Peterson as a pilot. Another training accident, the death of Squadron Commander Varian White, helped to fuse the newly formed 357th into a fighting unit. White's replacement, a fighter pilot fresh from the Pacific Theater, Thomas Hayes.
General Hayes, we loved him. He was kind of my ideal in a way. He came to our unit as a more experienced pilot than we were. You know, he came in as a squadron commander. And so he'd been in the South Pacific and he had been in combat and he'd shot down Japanese. You know, to me that was, he was like God.
Well, I think the greatest thing I could see when I arrived at Tonopah was, geez, the gung-ho spirit there. And what a success this 357th actually enjoyed. You got an outfit like that, it's a case of holding them back. It's not a case of pushing them.
Tonopah afforded us an opportunity to fly from the crack of dawn, even up through dark. We night flying and everything like that, so we piled up a bunch of time. A fighter group or a fighter organization is actually only about as good as its experience level. There's nothing within 75 miles in any direction that can be hurt by human hand. I mean, nothing. So that's why they called it the Tonopah Bombing and Gunnery Range. It was a beautiful, desolate desert. A rattlesnake would carry his lunch pail going across that country out through there.
We had a good outfit, and from what experience I had, I wanted to pass this on and get this unit ready. If I made any mistakes, in hindsight, I think it was because we were flying P-39s. All three squadron commanders, each squadron commander, had experience in the Pacific. We were flying P-39s. The Germans had destroyed every P-39 as fast as it would fly in Europe. And I G2'd the thing. We were not going to Europe. We were going to go to the Pacific.
The destination of the 357th was not the Pacific. They would be crossing a different ocean. Still boys, untested in combat, their adversary would be the German Luftwaffe. Their next training ground, the skies of Europe.
And we were then sent to England on the Queen Elizabeth. There were 17,000 on the Queen Elizabeth. And I was in a honeymoon suite with 17 guys, bunk to bunk, and stacked up.
We came in typical British weather. We got our indoctrination right off the bat. It was lousy and foggy and drizzly. We had a band playing for us, but this time it didn't do us any good because they were playing deep in the heart of Texas, and we sure as hell weren't going back.
They were assigned to a base named Leiston, near the town of Yoxford. The first night in their new home, welcome came from unexpected quarters.
We always listened to German radio because they played the best music, Glenn Miller and so on at the time, and all the good American music, because then they'd obviously get the Americans listening to them, and they could fill us with propaganda about how our girlfriends back home were having fun with the fellas who were staying at home, and yet we were over here fighting the war, and isn't that too bad, etc. Well, this particular time, the first night we were at Leiston, here comes this guy on the radio and said, "We want to welcome the Yoxford boys to Leiston, England, at Leiston Air Base." And my God, here's the German radio station talking about us, and we had arrived that night. And I said, "Jesus, we don't have a chance here. They know too much about us already."
The England of late 1943 was not the battered Ireland of 1940. The Battle of Britain had been won, and now England was the launching pad for the aerial assault on the Nazi war machine. The pastures and fields of the quiet English countryside were now dotted with hundreds of airstrips from which the 8th Air Force launched bombing strikes deep into the enemy heartland. Early in the war, the Allies possessed no fighter plane with sufficient range to escort the bombers into Germany. The German fighter planes, fast and deadly accurate, pounced on the bombers. Attrition reached unacceptable rates. Each crew member knew that his chances of returning from a mission were 1 in 3. The P-51 Mustang tipped the balance in favor of the 8th. Equipped with extra fuel tanks, able to reach speeds of 437 miles per hour, it flew farther, faster, higher, shepherding the bombers to their targets. The Mustang provided the shield for the sword arm of tactical bombing, and the Nazis soon gained an awesome respect for the plane and its pilots.
We started getting the P-51s, and I can say categorically that's probably the easiest airplane the United States Air Corps ever had to initially get in and fly. It required the least preparation. This was an honest airplane. I mean, it was great.
The first opportunity I had of engaging enemy aircraft was on the Bordeaux raid. We were being hit. And I just happened to notice, see this one, and I called him out to my wingman. And he was down below, coming across, and I rolled over on my back to lead him, to get at him, either way, whichever way he went. And the wingman was with me. And I got so excited. I could see the crosses on the wings, and my God, I started firing before I should have. And I held the damn trigger down. And I was just throwing lead all over the place. And Harry rolled, pulled up, I'm rolling, firing. Lucky enough, I got some strikes on the cockpit. He kicked the canopy off, or got the canopy off, and kicked the stick, and he popped up. And as he went floating on by, he gave me a salute, and I'll never forget, it just raised the hackles on my neck. Somewhat chivalrous to the guy, you know.